It's time we talk about another Greek person who talks about the Ethiopians, and it's Pliny. And in this case, Pliny talks about the many variations of Ethiopians. But within the inner compass of Africa, towards the south and above the Gaetuli, where the deserts come between, the first people that inhabit are the Libi Egypti, and then the Lyco Ethiops. Above them are the Ethiopian nations, the Nigrita, from whom the river was named, the Gemnites, Pharisee, and those which now reach to the ocean, whom we spake of in the border of Mauritania, the Perosi. From all these of vast solitude eastwards, to the Garamantes, Oglea, and Troglodytes, according to the truest opinion of them, who place two Ethiopias above the desert of Africa, and especially of Homer, who saith that the Ethiopians are divided two ways, towards the east and the west. So, how do you assess the statement? Well, first of all, you notice that he's mentioning the many variations of Ethiopians, and he adds Libya Egyptians and he adds Garamantes in there, which Garamantes we know are an Ethiopian tribe, Troglodytes is another one, and they live in the north. The Ethiopian nations that he mentions, when he says nations, he means ruled by Ethiopians. The Garamantes were taken over by Romans at this time. So when he says Ethiopian nations, he doesn't mean these nations are separate from the other ones that he mentions. All of these people are Ethiopians, including the Libi Egyptus and everybody else. As you can see here, it states also the very illustrious town of Garama, the head of the Garamantes, all which place the Roman arms have conquered, and over them Cornelius Bulbus triumphed, the only man of foreigners that was honored with the triumphant chariot and endowed with the freedom of the Roman citizens. So again, the nations that are above the Gaetoli, which is the area that was conquered by the Romans, it shows that above that area are Ethiopian nations, and below that area are Ethiopian nations. To add a greater perspective to this, let's read another part where Pliny talks about Ethiopians in the northern part of Africa. The river Senesis, the nation of Selextia and Masati, the rivers Masatal and Darat, wherein crocodiles are produced, then a bay of 516 miles enclosed within the promontory of the mountain Bars, running out into the west, which is called Serentium. After it, the river pulses, beyond which are the Ethiopian Perosi, and at their back are the Pharisee, upon whom join the inland people, the Gaetoli Dera. But upon the coast are the Ethiopian Deratite, the river Bombatus, full of crocodiles and hippopotamus. So as you can see here, the area that is considered today Berber territory is actually back then considered to be native to the Perosi. And as you can see here, how the experts break it down, Plinius wrote that the area north of the river Senegal was populated during Augustus' time by the Pharisee and Perosi. Berbers moved south to Mauritania beginning the 3rd centuries, followed by Arabs in the 8th century, subjugating and assimilating Mauritanians' original inhabitants. Here you go, people. You have a ancient person who lived at the time saying that the Berbers came in the 3rd century replacing the native population. Remember when people said, "Hey, where's the replacement? How come there's no writing about the replacement?" Well, here you go. And that's it, right? We're done here. So we can move on and read another statement by Plinius. The Mori, which in time past was the principal and of whom the province took its name, and those most writers have called Maurici, being by war weakened, they wasted to a few families. Next to them were the Mososeli, but in like manner they were extinguished. Now are the nations inhabited by Gaetuli, Beneri, and Otololes, the most powerful of all, a part of whom were once the Vesuni, but being divided from them, they became a nation by themselves, and were turned to Ethiopians. This province being full of mountains eastward, Ephraites, elephants. Okay, so again, you see more writing about the Mori, the Moors. This Mori word is the Moors. And remember, I read to you Herodotus and the other person saying that the word Moor comes from the skin color of the people. People always say we don't know where the word Moor comes from. We do know. It's written down by the ancients. They say that it comes from the skin color of the people. And what skin color are the people of Mauritania? Well, according to Plinius, the skin color is Ethiopian, the black Ethiopians. And as you can see here, he says that the Gaetuli, the Benere, and the Atolilis overpowered the original Mori, and then the original Mori, and then the Gaetuli, Beneri, and Atobilis, who are the most powerful nations by themselves, and were turned into Ethiopians. So those nations were then turned into Ethiopians. So according to this guy, by this time, the province of Tanya, which you will see is in North Africa, the people during his time were turned into Ethiopians. So they start off as Moors, they move on to Gaetuli, Benuri, and Atotalians, and then they move back to being Ethiopians. That is the history. So if you're wondering who these Gaetuli people are who conquered the original Mauritanians, the Gaetuli who replaced the Mauritanians who were there before them, as you can read on Wikipedia, Gaetuli was a Romanized name of an ancient Berber tribe inhabiting Gaetuli. The latter district covered the large desert region south of the Atlas Mountains bordering the Sahara. Now listen to this part, which some guy just added for no reason. Other documents place Gaetuli in pre-Roman times along the Mediterranean coasts of what is now Algeria and Tunisia and north of the Atlas. Now, you notice how he didn't put any documents, and even the reference points says which, meaning which documents are you talking about, state this. Instead, they put the document that I just put, continuing. So let's continue. Algeria and Tunisia and north of the Atlas during the Roman period. According to Pliny the Elder, the Otololos Gaetuli established themselves south of the province of Mauritania Tangita in modern-day Morocco. The name of Godola people is hypothesized to be derived from the word Gaetuli. So the Berber seem to be a nation that comes after the Mauritanians, and they come later, and then, as you read there, they were turned into Ethiopians, making it sound like the light skin of the people of that region, of the Algeria, Tunisia region, happened more closer to us than they did to these people, according to what they saw. Temples betray the Syrians. The Ethiopians stain the world
and depict a race of men steeped in darkness. Less sunburnt are the natives of India. The land of Egypt, flooded by the Nile, darkens bodies more mildly owing to the inundation of its fields. It is a country nearer to us, and its moderate climate imparts a medium tone. The sun god dries up with dust the tribes of Africans amid their desert. The Moors derive their name from their faces and their identity proclaimed by the color of their skins.
This passage is by Marcus Manlius, and as you can see, he is saying that the skin color of the Moors is what gives the name of them. And as you can see, if you put two and two together, the Moors were conquered by the Gaetuli, the people, the Berber tribe that came in the third century. And the Moors, as he states, the Mori, as he states, are said to have got their name from their skin color. That's what he says. Put two and two together, you can see that the Mori, the Mauritania, and the Moors is the same thing. Therefore, the Moors were originally black Africans. And later on, the Moors became Berber like, but then they had extra Ethiopian and they became part of the Ethiopian nations. That is the history. Now that we have the full context of what North Africa looked like, let's reread this verse with this in perspective. But within the inner compass of Africa, towards the south and above the Gaitoli meaning the Berber areas, where the deserts come between the first people that inhabited. So the desert comes in between, meaning that north and south of the desert and in between and in the desert are the original inhabitants, are the Libi Egypti. So he says the Egyptians, the Libyan Egyptians, and then the Leuco Ethiops, meaning the, I think that also means Libyan Ethiopians. Above them are the Ethiopian nations, the Nigrit, from which the river was named, the river Niger, the Nigrit, which is the old word for Negro, for which the river Niger was named. The Gemites, the Furisi, and those which now reach to the ocean, whom we spake of in the border of Mauritania. So you see, these other people are inhabiting that area that we were talking about earlier in Mauritania. The Perosi from all these are vast solitude eastward. So the Perosi, again, written there, it was the Ethiopian Perosi, which means they were Ethiopians. And this part is only about Ethiopians, by the way. To the Garamantes, Oglia, the troglodyte, according to the truest opinion of them, who place two Ethiopias above the desert of Africa, and especially of Homer, who saith that the Ethiopians are divided two ways, towards the east and the west. So the Egyptians, all the way to the Tunisians, were considered Ethiopians by Pliny. And remember, I told you a long time ago that Strabo, another guy, Strabo said that the Ethiopia, the continent of Ethiopia, which now we call Africa, is the entire continent, and it's based on the people who inhabit the region. As I showed you last time, he marked the world in four pieces and said Ethiopia is Africa, Celtiberia is that area of Britain, Sweden, those areas that have Celtic and Iberian people. Then he said Asia, which is
owned by the Middle Easterners. Then he said the continent of India. So India he separates from the rest of Asia as a piece. And then he said the Scythians at the top, which are like the Russians and all those other type of people.
Into two divisions. 2.27 These and other more stringent arguments may be urged against Aristarchus and those of his school, to clear our poet from the charge of such gross ignorance. I assert that the ancient Greeks, in the same way as they classed all the northern nations with which they were familiar under the one name of Scythians, or, according to Homer, Nemad, and afterwards becoming acquainted with those towards the west, styled them Celts and Iberians, sometimes compounding the names into Celtiberians, or Celtoscythians, thus ignorantly uniting various distinct nations. So I affirm they designated as Ethiopia the whole of the southern countries towards the ocean. Of this there is evidence, for Aeschylus, in the Prometheus Lust, thus speaks, there is the sacred wave, and the coralled bed of the Erythraean Sea, and there the luxuriant marsh of the Ethiopians, situated near the ocean, glitters like polished brass, where daily in the soft and tepid stream, the all-seeing sun bathes his undying self, and refreshes his weary steeds. And as the ocean holds the same position in respect to the sun, and serves the same purpose throughout the whole southern region, he therefore concludes that the Ethiopians inhabited the whole of the region. And Euripides in his Phaeton says that Clymene was given to Merops, sovereign of that land which from his four-horse chariot first the rising sun strikes with his golden rays, and which its swarthy neighbors call the radiant stable of the morn and sun. Here the poet merely describes them as the common stables of the morning and of the sun, but further on he tells us they were near to the dwellings of Merops, and in fact the whole plot of the piece has reference to this. This does not therefore refer alone to the land next to Egypt, but rather to the whole southern country extending along the seacoast. 2.28 Ephorus likewise shows us the opinion of the ancients respecting Ethiopia, in his treatise on Europe. He says, if the whole celestial and terrestrial globe were divided into 4 parts, the Indians would possess that towards the east, the Ethiopians towards the south, the Celts towards the west, and the Scythians towards the north. He adds that Ethiopia is larger than Scythia, for, says he, it appears that the country of the Ethiopians extends from the rising to the setting of the sun in winter, and Scythia is opposite to it. It is evident this was the opinion of Homer, since he places Ithaca towards the gloomy region, that is, towards the north, but the others apart, towards the morning and the sun, by which he means the whole southern hemisphere. And again when he says, speed they their course with right-hand flight towards the ruddy east, or leftward down into the shades of eve. Iliad 12.
So it's all separated, and Africa is put together by Strabo, a different guy. And this guy just said that he saw North Africans as the original inhabitants as Ethiopians. Now, and of course, we have Marcus Manlius, who was writing over there that the Ethiopians stain the world and blah, 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 blah. And he also says that the Moors get their name from the skin color. Now, we have 3 different people who are writing that the Ethiopians back then are all the inhabitants of Africa. How scary is that for you guys to know that all this information is out there and nobody is calling this out except for so-called Afrocentrists? Says the river Niger is the same nature as Nilus, producing the reed and papyrus and the same living creatures, and swelleth at the same seasons. It springeth between the Terlere Ethiopian and Osilia, the town Maven belonging to this people. Some have set upon the desert near them Atlantia, the Apagani, half beasts, the Blemi, the Gamphasantia, Satria, and Hymantopadia. Those Atlantia, if we will believe it, degenerate from human manners. So it's discussing more North Africans who are Ethiopian. But let's read more if you skip the parts where he's just describing the geography. He says, names from the borders, and therefore they shall be declared together. The next country to Africa that is inhabited is Egypt, receding westward to the south, so far as to the Ethiopians, who are stretched out on its back. The Nilus is on the lower part, and is divided on the right and left by its encircling, it boundeth it with the mouth of Canopus from Africa, and with the Pelasiac from Asia, with an interval of 170 miles, for which cause some have reckoned Egypt among the island, considering that Nilus doth so divide itself as to make a triangular figure. And so many have called Egypt by the name of Greek letter delta because it's a triangle. The measure of it from the channel where it is single, from whence it first parteth into sides to the mouth of Canopus, and the Pulse 256, the upmost part bounding upon Ethiopia, is called Thebius, which is Thebes. It is divided into townships with separate jurisdictions, which they call Nomi, as Ombites, Fatinites, Apollopolites, Hermonthites, Thynites, Ferentinites, and so on, so on. I'm not reading that. The country about Pelusium hath these Nomi, but the remainder, the Arabic, the Harmoniac, which extendeth to the oracle of Jupiter Hammon, and so on, so on, so on. In like manner of Libya, Meroites, Heraclopetus is in an island from Nilus 50 miles long, wherein also is the place they call the town of Hercules. There are two Arsenites, they and Memphites reach as far as the head of Delta. Upon it the border out of Africa, the two Ausete. There are writers that change some of the names and substitute other nomi. So again, I mean, it's hard to gather from this, but Egypt is another Ethiopian land, and it's stretched from Ethiopia. There is no accusation of other groups being native to this region, and we're not even done. That we still have to read the Ptolemy's opinions on people who are mixed with Ethiopians. But next we have Pliny saying something that almost all the other people were saying back then, and here it is. The river Jomus runneth into the Ganges through Pilobretis, between the town Mothroia and Syriobaka, beyond the river Ganges, in that quarter which lieth southwards. The people are colored by the sun, but though tinted, yet not so burnt as the Ethiopians. And the nearer they approach to the Indus, the deeper colored they are with the sun. For closely beyond the nation of Prasi is the Indus, among whose mountains and pygmy are reported to inhabit. So we have this verse again, and if you recognize it, it's this thing where they're comparing India to the Ethiopians because of the skin color. And again, notice how before they compared the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, the Colchians in skin color. This guy is just doing the skin color of the Ethiopians and the Indians.
In mind, let's read the ancients. This passage comes from Astronomica, written by Manilius, and is a Latin didactic poem about celestial phenomena. The Ethiopians stain the world and depict a race of men steeped in darkness. Less sunburnt are the natives of India. The land of Egypt, flooded by the Nile, darkens bodies more mildly, owing to the inundation of its fields. It is a country nearer to us, and its moderate climate in parts a medium tone. From Arrianus between the 1st and 2nd century. The appearance of the inhabitants is also not very different in India and Ethiopia. The southern Indians are rather more like Ethiopians, as they are black to look on, and their hair is black, only they are not so snub-nosed or woolly-haired as the Ethiopians. The northern Indians are most like the Egyptians, physically.